The current problem facing the Chinese economy is not merely, a matter of macroeconomic issue. It's always been kind of the combination of the, macro issue and also the structural issue. Hopes that the renminbi, could be something that could reflect the, economic progress of the Chinese economy, but at the same time, it's not really generate disturbing factor to the
Professor Zhang Jun, really happy to catch up with you here in Beijing. Professor Zhang Jun is the Dean of the School of Economics at Fudan University and one of the most influential economists in China, and my very good friend, whom I use as a brains trust to catch an idea of some of the issues that China is going through. And maybe we can just have a quick chat on what are the key macroeconomic issues facing China right now, and what would you like to see as an economist?
Well, I always believe that the current problem facing the Chinese economy is not merely a matter of macroeconomic issue. It's always been kind of the combination of the macro issue and also the structural issue. We could see there is a kind of reflection of the structural issue, up to the level of aggregate, for the macroeconomy. So this, I think, is going to help understand why the Chinese authorities are very much reluctant to implement some of the expansionary policy, because that could really
so easy. It's very
that's
obvious.
easy, but
The structural side.
they could actually exaggerate the problems for the structural issue. So then they have to think about in the balancing act, how they could tackle the macro issue at the same time, so where the structural issue could be improve.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the structural issues that are most important at the moment?
Well, I mean, the structural issues is always originated from, for instance, the private sector versus the
private
state sector, right?
Okay, that's one.
And you always get the unfair allocation of the resources towards the private sector, because the state sector always dominate in the allocation of the resources, including the financial resources and credit. So that's why I think the authority right now has been very cautious about easy the environmental the policy environment facing the private sector, because entrepreneurs are very concerned about uncertainties in terms of for instance the economy itself over the next couple of years, how the entrepreneur could see the policy change which is going to favor more the private sector, so that they could improve the efficiency of the allocation of resources between the private and between the state and the private sector.
So when you say private sector, actually there is a small business world in China which is always has a problem with credit or access to credit. And then there are the listed private entities, the huge technology companies, which I would think they get their capital from outside of the Chinese system. So what is the zero-sum game in terms of allocation of capital in China?
It's not a matter of zero-sum problem, because if you put more resources onto the private sector, including some of the gigantic firm, I think they're going to have more output growth, because of they have quite high efficiency generated from for instance, reallocation of the resources. So when you have faster productivity growth, as a result of the reallocation of the resources from from the state sector where to the private sector, they're going to really raise the productivity itself. So that could really put the economy back
So as an economist, you'd like to see the private sector being incentivized more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of demand, aggregate demand in China, that hasn't come up since COVID. What do you think are the factors, affecting that, and what needs to be done?
Well, you could just think about, why the aggregate demand did not really rebound, to the level that most people
What's your
believe.
take? Yeah.
I think the reason quite simple because we got COVID, right? So the COVID could hit both the supply side and the aggregate demand. So it's not simply a problem of business cycle. It's actually it is the lockdown. It is a matter of some of the stagnation, for instance, in most of the economic activities. So it hurt a lot of people, families, as well as the private, business. So it could take time,
Can it be stimulated? Can demand be stimulated by lower interest rates, by access to credit, by lifestyle changes?
Not as much as in the case of the simply you're going to run the business cycle. When you have the business cycle, you could do a lot of stimulating policies, to let the aggregate demand, to rebound as strong as most people believe. But when you have this kind of recession from COVID, then actually you're gonna really take more time, to fix the aggregate demand. Of course, it's a little bit easier, to fix the aggregate demand than to fix, your confidence,
So is that what's missing? Confidence?
Well, 3 years COVID, I think it would really change psychologically, a lot of things for not only the business guys but also the household families.
What is your take on inflation in China? It looks like a different story altogether from the U.S. or Europe.
Well, I think this is a very different storytelling here in China in terms of inflation because, think about Chinese economy. It's been long, going like the surplus economy because the economy has been always, equipped with excessive supply of almost everything, right? So it's difficult to actually trigger the inflation unless you really have some bottleneck, But I don't think right now the bottleneck is just down there. I think this is right now the overcapacity is still an issue. So it's, aggregate demand. I think in China, would around the corner all the time. So you have to think about this. So it's totally different from what we have seen in the U.S., where the economy has been steady state for a long time. But here in China, you still have a long way to catch up.
So you would like to see a little bit of inflation or more inflation?
I hope the inflation could be modest. 3 to 4%.
Right.
It's tolerant. But unfortunately, it didn't come.
Right. And exchange rates. What is the battlefield that the renminbi faces in maintaining both price stability within the country and competitiveness outside the country?
Well, for the economy like China, you always have, for instance, in the long run perspective on the renminbi exchange, because the economy is growing. It's always been growing positively, put China in the context of the global economy. Renminbi must be going up, in the long run, right?
Okay.
So it becomes stronger, right?
Yes.
But in short run, you could be more flexible, more fluctuating.
Is it desirable for the renminbi to be stronger, or is it that the renminbi should be flexible in responding to challenges, importing inflation and so on?
From perspective of the market mechanism, it is good for renminbi to be determined, by the market, by the supply and demand, So this is what Chinese authorities did. over the past, for 2 decades, right? To try to, liberalize, marketize exchange rate for renminbi.
Yes.
But
And they do say that they have not been interfering lately, or they've been within a band.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So they really created the policy for renminbi to be mostly determined by the market forces.
Yes.
But at the same time, they put some of the cap, on the fluctuations. Because I think, the government hopes that the renminbi, could be something that could reflect the, economic progress of the Chinese economy. But at the same time, it's not really generate disturbing, factor to the
No,
Chinese economy.
because also as a foreigner, I see that if you're going to get more external debt created on the renminbi, the external borrowers would like to see not a strong renminbi, that that it keeps within a certain range or
Yes.
it's weakening, so that their renminbi commitments are not
Right.
too high. So it has conflicting policies in
Yes.
in motion.
So that's what I think. That's why the government say, well, we hope that the renminbi could eventually determine, by market forces. But at the same time, we put some policy framework, to let renminbi, to move with the reflection of the economic progress. So I think, as an exporter, you hope the renminbi could be cheaper, right?
Yeah.
Right. But for import, hope the renminbi could be stronger,
Right.
so that you could have
Lower costs.
low costs for manufacturers. So I think that the policy is more, kind of modest combination of the market versus intervention.
Now, as an economist, what policies do you think, or do you hope that the government will be pursuing in order to create demand, create stability, price stability, and economic growth? What are the you said structural. So
Yes.
what are some of the structural agendas that are topmost in your mind?
Well, I think in my mind, where the economy going to moving continuously toward the high quality development.
You prefer high quality
High
development?
quality
Yeah.
development,
Okay.
in the long run.
Yeah.
So that the productivity must be going up.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, they have to maintain, this sort of stability at a macro level, because otherwise you're gonna have a big problem, in the short run, right? So I think you do a lot of coordination, right? Between the short term and the long term, so you have to make your policy more consistent and predictable, so that you have a long time horizon to implement your long-term growth policy. So I think at this moment, because of the COVID, there are some of the interruptions in terms of the policy, consistency. But I think in the long run, you have to be, more consistent in terms of the implementation of the policy, so that the economy can move, in the right direction.
How long do you think the state can maybe tolerate or absorb a lower GDP growth rate? I think 5%. Without giving up some of the structural issues that it has to deal with, and also a deficit budget, which has been deficit for a while. So as an economist, do you think that these are good things, bad things, or it's a risk reward type of issue that results in some benefit?
Well, I mean, the simple way to think about your problem is to look at the unemployment rate, right?
Okay.
Right. So, in the long run, I think China going to have a slow growth of the employment.
Yeah.
But in the short run, you still have an increase of the unemployment. So you have to think about the unemployment, at this moment.
Which is high.
Yeah, which is a little bit high right now.
Yes.
So I think when you're talking about the tolerance, for the slow growth, I think the unemployment would be the bottom line.
Okay.
Right.
The major indicators: employment, recreating employment in a very changing world. I mean, now with a lot of advances in artificial intelligence, it's not like recreating the jobs that used to exist. Jobs are going to be redefined. In fact,
Yes.
even in China, especially in China.
Yeah.
So what is your take on this challenge that faces China?
Well, I think people getting used to some of the changes in the labor market. I think 10 years ago when we first come to the economy where there were a lot of us, young people who either exit from the labor market, or they didn't want to take any job after graduation.
Right.
I think at that time we would be surprising to see
Why?
that.
Yeah.
Because we saw it's incredible. We can't accept it. But today I think more and more young students, even after graduation, they wouldn't like step back.
Right.
They would return to home.
Right.
And stay with their parents. So I think this is kind of
Changing lifestyle,
or
personal,
something. Yeah. Some students would prefer the gap year, before.
So leisure is becoming a more important factor in Chinese.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you redefine the utility function of the young student,
Yes.
I think that it would really keep still pretty high.
Yes.
For the total utility.
Yes, and changing demographics as well.
Yeah.
We got fewer and fewer younger people, so that although they're taking time out, it doesn't show as a pressure point in
That's right.
in the economy.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think the biggest challenge for any economy today, not only the U.S., China, or Europe, and other emerging market development, economies, I think the change of the labor market is really fundamental. Yeah.
Right. So what are the policies that you'd like to see come into place? Well, what do you think the government should prioritize?
Right now, well, I think they probably should keep the economy growing, at a modest rate. At the same time, the macroeconomy, just okay. So I don't think the government, would take, measures to tackle with the aggregate demand at it,
I see.
at the expenses
The
of
government
the structural problem.
Right. So the government is not going to incentivize aggregate demand. That its priorities are the structural.
Yeah. I think so. They hope to create some of the, conditions that are favorable for, structural reforms to be carried out. So that's the top priority issue.
Got it. Thank you very much, Professor Zhang Jun. He's my brain's trust in terms of catching a glimpse of the economic priorities in China. Thank you very much.
Thank you.